Alright, so let's talk about CSS. What is CSS, guys? That's the first question. Yeah, okay, cool. So what it means beyond the
coloring and designing layouts.
Yeah, designing layouts. Yeah. Let me ask you a question I've been asking many developers in my life on interview processes. Do you think CSS is important? Do you care about CSS? Yeah, depending on your mood that day, right? Right, CSS is important. I find particularly shocking and surprising developers admitting in a job interview, CSS is for designers. I do JavaScript, yeah? That's not the way it works. If you want to become a full stack developer, you need to know JavaScript, we all agree on that, but you also need to know CSS. You are not expected to be the next Leonardo da Vinci, yeah? But there are some rules and some techniques that you're expected to satisfy in order to create proper user interfaces, yeah? In that respect, on the 12th of November, we have a senior UX designer here in the evening. We have a big event. So he has many years of experience creating user interfaces and responsive designs and blah, blah, blah. So if you want to join the event, please check Meetup. I think it's sold out already. But if you really want to attend it, let me know, and I'm sure we can have some space for you. Yeah? Cool. So today we're going to talk about CSS. And the reason is, we'll try as much as possible, and this at some point won't be possible anymore, but as far as possible, we're trying to sync our workshops with your progress in conflicts, yeah? Because the majority of you now is working on task number 2 or 3, yeah? You are creating layouts already, so let's talk about layouts. Cool, what you can see at the moment is just it's a new Create React app, which is what you set up yesterday, mostly, yeah? So I have an app with nothing. I haven't touched any line of code. So let's start the server, first of all, right? So you know that you can start the server using an external terminal, and that's fine, yeah? Or you can, you know that with Visual Studio Code, you can integrate a terminal as well, which is much more convenient, because look at the problem. If I'm using an external terminal, I need to keep doing ping pong, doing one and the other. I don't really like this context switching because that plays against productivity. However, if you go to Visual Studio, on top, you will see, you cannot see on the screen, but you can trust me, there is a menu entry that says Terminal, and then with an option called New Terminal. And you click on it, boop, you see, you got the terminal integrated into Visual Studio Code. So if there is any problem starting the server or blah, 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 you see everything quickly. Yeah? Right, guys, how do we start the server with Node? npm run? Start. npm run start, right? Look, when I click on it, I got a warning. That may happen to you. That may happen to you. By default, you can only sort of run one Node application at a time, because each Node application requires a port. Have you seen in your URL, localhost 3000? The number is booking that port for that application. However, in reality, you can use multiple ports. So you may get that warning. That's fine. Like, hey, you are already running an app. I'm running the Codiri app locally. Are you sure you want to run another app? Yes. Thank you for nothing, right? 2019, these things are expected to happen. And as soon as I agreed on running a second app, so I'm a bit borderline today, it will open a new tab on my browser, and essentially it will display the React logo, which is what I believe everybody already managed to get so far, right? Okay, so because I'm creating a new app, the very first thing I'm going to do is to delete everything. In other words, if you want to become a professional painter, like the very famous guy we have in the other room, how do you think we should start creating a new piece of art? Do you think we should start painting on a white canvas or on top of this poster? White canvas, right? It doesn't make sense to paint on top of something that is already there. We want to start from scratch. So I don't want to have, if I'm creating the next multi-billion app, I don't want to have the React logo there. That doesn't make sense, right? So let's clean everything. And how do we do that? Well, we got the app.js, which is the main file. So I'm going essentially to delete the majority of the code here. By the way, this is React. And in React, as you'll get familiar with in the next days, we are combining, what language is that, guys? The highlighted on top. No, wrong. This is JavaScript. And what language is that?
JSX.
Okay, technically speaking, you are right, you got the job. But to simplify things a bit, it looks like, even though, yeah, that's correct, it's not HTML, but it's very similar to HTML, yeah? If you know a bit of HTML from FreeCodeCamp or these places, this is similar to HTML, right? So React became so popular because of multiple reasons, and one of them is because its ability to combine JavaScript and HTML in a single place. Yeah, this is very convenient for productivity. Historically speaking, you have the JavaScript file and you have the HTML file completely disconnected, yeah, but that was not that productive because if you change the JavaScript, you are likely to change the HTML and vice versa. So things that change together or that are likely to change together should stay together. Yeah, so this is React. Of course, we'll do many workshops about React, but for now, look, I'm going to delete all the noise from my app, and then I'm going to add a title. Welcome to my app. Yeah, just a basic text. So back to the browser, let's see what happened. You see, it's very small, but if I zoom it, I hope you agree that's a much better starting point. I don't have any noise. So imagine that we want to increase the size of the text. Does anyone know in HTML how to make the size of the text bigger? H1, fantastic, I love it. So look, with H1, back to the browser, now the text looks better, yeah? So what the message here is, even though technically speaking that's not HTML, it shares 95% of the standard of HTML. So if you know a bit of HTML, if you already knew that with H1 you can make the title bigger, bolder, of course you can reuse that knowledge, yeah? Another reason why React became so popular, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, trying to create new things again and again, like other frameworks and languages and libraries have been doing like Angular, if something is there already, let's just reuse it. So if you know how to change the font size, well, just reuse it, yeah? Cool. One of the reasons why I like to keep the server running is because if there is something wrong, if there is any error, even if there is any warning, look, I can quickly spot it. Can anyone tell me what the warning is about? You need to delete something. What do we need to delete? Yeah, correct. It's very hard to see with this projector, but maybe you can spot that line number 2 is grayed out. It's grayed out. So Visual Studio is telling you, hey, why do you import something if you don't use it? Yeah? Like why you buy milk and you put it into the fridge if you don't consume it. So that's pretty much the same principle. Whenever you import something, it's because you need to use it. If not, boom. Yeah? I love to delete code. The code you delete is the only one that will never ever fail again. It's the most robust code because it's not there anymore. Okay, so you see, and now I got a perfect compile, so it works perfectly. By the way, you probably didn't notice, or maybe you did, but you can check your CodeFlix app directly on your phone right now. Yeah, that's good because starting from task number 4, I believe, you start doing mobile stuff. So it's really good to be able to test your CodeFlix app on your phone, right? You just need to type that URL. Well, it will be different for everyone, and make sure you are connected to the Wi-Fi. Yeah, if not, it won't work. Anyway, so that's the HTML. But now the question is, how do we change the CSS? Look, you can see alongside my app.javascript, I got app.css. Yeah? So in here, we can declare the styling of our application. I can zoom it a bit if it helps. Yeah? Many different styles. Again, do you remember what I did with my HTML? I cleared everything because I didn't care about the default HTML. Do you really think I care about the default link color? Not really, right? So you know what I'm going to do next. I'm going to remove pretty much everything. I'll leave the first one just for reference purposes, but I'll remove everything. I mean, nothing will change actually, but at least now my CSS is much cleaner. Even though we'll do a workshop about CSS selectors and everything, for now, do you know what that dot, can you tell me what that line means?
It's not going after a class.
Class, correct, you're right. Whenever in CSS we refer to a dot, you see dot something, is going to the HTML and it's saying, please find an element with class up. You see, up. Can we find it? Yes, it's here. So then, do something. Textaligncenter means drop the text into the middle of the screen, horizontally speaking. Yeah? And of course, we can add whatever property we want, so we can change the color, right? So if you type background color, yellow, for instance, yeah, you got the background color yellow. If I, what else? Change the text, color blue, the title becomes blue, right? So we can play a bit with CSS. If you've never done any CSS, what I strongly recommend you to do is go to the platform and then go to training, HTML and CSS, beginner, and then play a bit with it. Yeah. So if you've never seen that, let me show you an example. So in that particular case, this is pretty sexy. Actually, there is nothing like that on the internet. And if you find something similar, please let me know. Yeah. So for JavaScript, React, you got things like Code Wars, Free Code Camp, but for HTML and CSS, there is nothing like that. So this is something we created. So look, we present you a device. This is a smartphone. And then we show you different devices, smartphone, tablets, laptop, and TV. Yeah? So now on the right-hand side, we need to type a bit of HTML and CSS to satisfy the requirements. So what the requirements are? We need to type some text. Welcome to HTML and CSS. Makes sense? And then we have to change the color of the text to yellow. Yeah? So look, because it's the very first question, we try to make things simple. You have the HTML already in place, and then we need to type some CSS. So how do you change the text color to yellow? Color, let's put green for now. Yeah? So that means that every div, a div is a container. Yeah? It's just an element in HTML. Every div, that's a div, should be painted using the text green color. Let's test it. Have you seen that joke, by the way? Right, let me show you. Sorry for all this mess of presentation, but I think this is important. So there is a big joke, programming in Hollywood movies versus programming in real life. Sorry about that. Oh, what the hell? What is the video? Ah, I found it. Let's play it again, right? Right. Yeah, so there are many jokes on the UA training. By the way, the UA training is private, so no one else. The majority of the content on the platform is public, but UA training is private. So if you don't have access, that's because we still need to grant you access. So drop us a message and we'll sort it out quickly. Yeah. Anyway, look at what happened here. By the way, that looks a bit dodgy. We need to change the UI a bit. But look, so we expected you to paint the text in yellow. You return it in green, and then look at the div. So this is something pretty unique. So we are evaluating the div between the two images, pixel by pixel, and then if you did something wrong, it becomes pink. You know this sort of drag test on the airports when you look suspicious and they bring you to a room and they analyze your luggage, and if they have like a liquid or something like that, and if it becomes pink, it's because you're a drug dealer, yeah? Yeah, so that's pretty much how it works. And then of course you can see the result for all the different devices. So obviously here you learn that the color shouldn't be green, should be what? Yellow, yeah? So if you paint it into yellow, hopefully we'll get some confetti. So that's pretty much the idea, yeah? So if you've never done any CSS, and even, yeah, go for it.
How come it works even though you don't put the dot something? Because I thought you were supposed to put dot. You know, the last one put dot at.
That's a good question. You put the dot if you want to refer to a class. Okay. We are not referring to any class, we're referring to a div. So there are different ways to select things in HTML, sorry, in CSS, yeah? We'll do a workshop to explain the difference. How to select a class, how to select an attribute, how to select an ID, how to select a tag, how to select, you know, all these things. We'll also talk about something I love, which is a specificity. It's always part of my job interviews, what a specificity is. Many developers struggle. So we'll do a workshop about that, I don't know, in the near future, for sure. All right, so yeah, that's the training module about HTML and CSS. So back to our application. Yep. No, not yet. We don't have any videos on UI training. This is a relatively new thing, so we didn't got time to have videos. Yeah? We have links and resources. And if you have any question, let us know. Cool. So this is our platform so far. Welcome to my app. So I'm going to build a very simplistic application. Actually, you know something that, as I mentioned yesterday, tomorrow we have a big event here, how to create a Brexit app. Once again, you are more than welcome to join it. Let me know you want to join it. Yeah? So I like to create a basic layout. I like to create a layout with 3 elements, and we'll see how to arrange them on the screen. So let's call it app, welcome to Brexit app. And then look, I'm going to draw 3 boxes. So look, I'm going to add a class name box. So that's the way I will identify and I can customize the styling a bit of my box. And then let's talk about the Brexit proposals. So delay Brexit, right? And then I can even put it in 1 line maybe for readability purposes. Yeah, something like that. So delay Brexit, cancel Brexit, new elections, right? Whatever, 3 boxes. And now back to the CSS, just to get the feeling of boxes, I'm going to add a border surrounding the boxes, right? Look, you see, I again use the dot box, because I'm using a class box. Yeah, that's the way we refer to the boxes. And now border, how can we add a border in CSS, guys?
You specify after border like red solid 3px, for instance.
Yeah, correct. So generally speaking, the standard way to do it, there is a shorthand. First of all, you specify the thickness of the border. So for instance, 5 pixels. Then the type of the border could be dotted, could be solid, could be dashed. Yeah, solid, yes, a red line, sorry, a solid line. And then the color. So let's put it, not green. I think red works better with Brexit, right? So 5 pixels solid red. So as soon as I go back to my web browser, how do you think the elements will be arranged? Do you think it will be arranged all in the same row, so one after the other, or will be arranged in different rows, like one underneath the other? How do you think is going to be the default alignment?
Columns.
In columns. Do you agree on that? Yeah. Columns? Let's have a look. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Even though that's a bit weird to see, let me get rid of all the title coloring, because it's just making everything a bit more confusing, right? But if we get rid of that, you see, in columns, column number 1, column number 2, no, actually that's rows, that's not columns. No, sorry. I read it wrong. Sorry, really wrong. No, sorry. Sorry. So by default, HTML is a block-based language. That means every div is displayed after the other. Yeah, so not by columns. I was thinking on rows. That's the problem. Yeah. So JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, it's all row-based, one after the other. But what happened if in reality, because I got plenty of space, I want to display everything in one row, in multiple columns, yeah? So I want to display delay Brexit on the left, I want to display cancel Brexit in the middle, and I want to display new elections on the right. That's the point. How do we do that? Even though that sounds pretty simple, historically speaking, that has been very challenging. If you've been working with CSS for a while, you may remember things like, no, way older than that, float left, right? That was a huge pain in the ass. But that's the way, historically speaking, CSS has worked. So you do display flex, but then, because that looks a bit dodgy, you need to do width 33% on each box. So then, hopefully, but because they have a border, it's not 33, it's maybe 32, and then it's completely messy. What happens if I add a fourth element? It doesn't work, right? So if now we add a fourth option, do you think it will fit on that same row or not? No, because we go beyond 100%, right? Look, burn it. So then we need to go back to the CSS, and then, it's not 32, it's 25, right? But it's not 25 neither because they have a border, so it's maybe 24. It doesn't scale. That's horrible, right? But again, this is the way CSS has been working until 2015, 2016, right? So we've suffered a lot. We suffered a lot with that. Thankfully, that was to me the worst aspect of CSS, has massively evolved over the last 4 years. So I'd like to show you at least one way to do it much nicer. And probably in the future, if we got time, I'll show you another way. So there are two mechanisms to deal with layouts. So one is Flex. That's the one I want to show you today. And another one is, do you know? Grid, correct. So grid is the sexiest thing in the world today. But let's talk about Flex. So with Flex, look, I'm going to remove all the float and width mess. So we'll have now 4 rows. Yeah, you see that? 4 rows. And now, look at how simple this is. We need to do 2 things. There are 2 key aspects of working with Flex. First of all, we need to surround, we need to encapsulate our boxes with a parent div. That's super important. So I need to create a new div. See, div, and then I'll put everything inside. That's the first thing, yeah? And now, on that parent div, we need to add a class name. How we call the class name, that's not very relevant. But if you check on the internet, which one?
Container.
Container, I like it. So container is sort of standard. Some developers like to call it wrapper as well. It doesn't really matter, yeah? You give a name. And then here, you can call them box. I think it's pretty common to call this element item or element. It doesn't really matter, right? This is just semantics. The important thing is you need a parent div and then one div for each element. That's the setup. So from the HTML point of view, that's it. I'm not going to do anything else. Now all my efforts will go to the CSS. So on the CSS, first of all, we rename it to item. What do we need to do? First of all, refer to the parent container. Do you think that's the correct way to refer to the parent?
No.
Why not?
You're missing
The dot. Yeah? All right, container. And then what do we do with the container? This is very important. Display flex. As soon as you do that, your user interface will change massively. So we went from nothing to a multi-billion app in 30 seconds. Yeah, you see? It's not perfect yet, but I hope you see the difference. So now, we don't have 4 rows. We have 1 row and 4 columns. Yeah, you agree on that? Let me show you a trick. Sometimes we need to change CSS very quickly. Like what happens if I change the color a bit? If I change, yeah? We need to do quick iterations. Let me show you how I like to prototype CSS. You know, in Google Chrome, which is the browser that I believe the majority of you are using, if you use Safari, it's pretty much the same thing. There is something called DevTools. So DevTools, we may run a workshop just to talk about DevTools because that's a huge world. So with DevTools, we can change, analyze your app in many different perspectives. So first of all, how do we open DevTools? You do right-click anywhere, right-click, and then you see a button called Inspect. I think there is a shortcut, I think it's F11 or something like that. But anyway, I prefer to right-click Inspect. And then, look, pop, you will see something like that, a new panel popping in. If it's the first time you open it, it will be at the bottom. But then you see, let me zoom that a bit. You see on the right-hand side, these three dots. You can change the positioning of the panel. So I like to leave it on the right-hand side. Yeah? And why I'm doing that? The reason is because now I can prototype quickly my application. Look, I can select HTML elements, you see? So I can drill down and I can try to find my container, you see? And I can then do whatever I want with it. Look, once I selected the container, I can change the CSS. I can add new properties directly on the browser. That's pretty awesome, right? For instance, background color, green. You see? Immediate, without refreshing, without anything. That's pretty awesome. Look at what happened if I untick the display flex property. Boop, you see? So it's a very visual way to see the impact of our changes. But let me ask you something. What happens if I do that and I refresh the browser? Will these changes persist or not? Not at all, not at all. So this is a very dirty way to play around with your app for prototyping. But as soon as you refresh, changes are gone. Yeah? So if you change something and you like the changes, remember, go back to your CSS and introduce the necessary changes. Yeah? All right, so we got 4 columns. So display flex definitely made some impact. And that means that now it doesn't matter if I have 3 columns, 2 columns, 4 columns, it will always fit on the same row, which is nice because we don't have to mess around with 25%, with 24%. Do you remember that was a big mess? So this is much better under my point of view. But now next question is, okay, even though that's a good improvement, that feels a bit weird, right? So why we have all this space on the right-hand side? Can we distribute my columns equally across that row? So can we force each column to fit 25% of the space? You get my point? Yeah? So how do we do that? That's something developers struggle a bit. So please pay attention now. In CSS, not on the container, but on the children, on the item, yeah, on the child element, you can do that. Flex 1. If you put flex 1, you are telling the web browser something interesting. First of all, let's look at the result. Have you seen the difference? Look. Now all the columns have the same width, and they go until the end of the web browser size. This is responsive. It doesn't matter if I have a very small screen or if I have a huge screen in a Super Bowl stadium, right? It goes from the beginning to the end of the row. And then look back. If I remove it, look. You can see the difference. Let's try to understand that flex 1. When we type flex 1, we are saying, hey, each item will span 1 virtual column. Virtual column. How many virtual columns do you think we have here? 12, wrong. We have 4 items. I think you agree on that. 4 boxes. and each item spans one virtual column. How many virtual columns do we have? 4. Yeah? That sounds stupid, but you'll see in a minute what's the logic behind. So we have 4 virtual columns and 4 visual columns, so they match. They match, yeah? But that could be different. Let me present you an example. What happens if we want to promote one of these options? If we want, for instance, to make new elections bigger, yeah? At the moment, each column spans 25% of the space of my screen. I hope you agree on that. But what happens if we want to make new elections to span 50%? So new elections should be twice as big as the other elements. We can do something. Look, I can go back to my HTML and I can add a new class to the element I want to highlight, because I want to apply specific CSS properties only to that element. So let's call it, I don't know, highlight, whatever. You see in CSS, you can declare multiple classes separated by one space. Yeah? Highlight. And then what? Look, I can go to my CSS and I can type .highlight flex 2. What that implies? Can anyone tell me how many virtual columns do we have now? 5, that's correct. Now we'll have 5 virtual columns. Visually speaking, it will be only 4, because we only have 4 items. Yeah? We haven't changed the number of items. 1, 2, 3, 4. But technically speaking, under the hood, the first item, delay Brexit, will span 1 virtual column. The second item, cancel Brexit, will span 1 virtual column. How many we got in total? 2. 1 plus 1. The third item will span 2 virtual columns. It will be bigger. Yeah? So that element will be as big as these 2 combined. Yeah? 1 plus 1 plus 2, 4, and then plus 1, 5. 5 virtual columns. Let's see what happened. Look, can you see the difference? I hope you can see that new elections is twice as big as the others. You see? Because it got flex 2. And of course, can we add flex 3, for instance? What will happen if I change 2 to 3? How many virtual columns will we have? 6, correct. And out of the total width of my screen, in percent, from 0 to 100, what will be the width of the new elections column if it spans 3 virtual columns? What will be the width? 50%, that's absolutely correct. Look, if I change 2 to 3, pop. Yeah. And now, this is spanning 50% of the total width. And you may be asking, oh, I don't trust that. Why 50% and not 49? Look, actually, I cannot zoom that, but when you shrink your browser, hopefully you can see here, it's telling you the actual resolution of your screen, which is pretty convenient, right? So the moment is, to simplify numbers, let's drop it to 1,000 pixels, more or less, yeah? 1,000. If I select my item, even though you cannot see anything again, in the middle of the screen, literally on top of the title, I got a tooltip. And that tooltip tells me the width and the height, the box model of each element on my screen. And this is 491, so it's essentially 50% of my width, right? So that's the key to mastering Flex. Remember, container, and then items, and then we need to display Flex and a given number on each item. Let me ask you a final question here. What happened if I change Flex to 100? What will be the visual result of that change? Will it make any difference, 1 or 100?
Isn't it all relative? So
It's the same thing.
Correct. Cam got it. Flex is relative to the siblings. So how many virtual columns do we have now? Wrong. Virtual columns. Wrong.
Like 103.
Wrong.
400.
400. Who say that? Right. So she got some points. We'll add some points. Not today, right? But whenever someone gives a beautiful answer to a complex question, we'll give you some points thinking on the whiteboard challenge. Why, technically speaking, we have 400 columns? Because we have 4 visual columns, right? Item, 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 and item. Each element spans 100 virtual columns. 100 plus 100 plus 100 plus 100. So we got 400 virtual columns. But because each column spans 100 virtual columns, still 1/4, right? 100 divided by 400. Well, that's the same. Yeah, what happens if I put 1 million here? Nothing changes. Yeah, if you ever see that code, that's very smelly. Yeah, that doesn't really make sense. If you want to make sure that all your columns have the same dimensions, leave it in 1. Yeah, easy. Only change it if, again, you want to highlight. You want to make one column more prominent because of whatever reason. Is there any questions?
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, did you have a question, Kevin? It's relative, so I understand like you can fit as many virtual columns in, but is it not, if each kind of item
Yep.
has a lot of content,
Mm-hmm.
at what point does it overflow, or does
Yeah,
it just get really
oh,
messy?
yeah, of course. There are some exceptions. There are some exceptions. Look, that's a good question, actually. At the moment, all my items have the same width. Do you agree on that? Thank you. But what happened if one of the elements have very large content? Let's have a look. Still works. But it still works because I have multiple words, so the web browser can wrap the text across multiple lines. However, what happens if I have a very long word? Look, without the spaces. It doesn't work anymore. Yeah? So obviously there are some limitations, there are some restrictions. This is not rocket science. Yeah? But out of the box, unless you do something a bit weird, it will work like that. We'll see in the future. I think you have task number 10 on Codeflix. We talk about how to wrap elements in a smarter way. So that could get a bit more advanced. But I think for now, that should be it. Just think about that the way we explain it, right? The container and then the items. So there was another question. You had a question before? Yeah? Say it again?
If you go that way, onto the left.
The browser?
No, in the code.
Ah, right.
Yeah, so you had, is this a CSS screen? No, this is.
No, that's the CSS. That's the CSS.
Dot item, then you had dot highlight or something.
Yeah, yeah, you can bring it back, yeah.
And then you put like flex.
Yeah.
2.
2.
If you were to delete the flex 2,
Yep.
then what happens? Does it disappear from the page? Or
It is no. So look, at the moment, the highlight column will be bigger, right? This is what we saw before. If I delete it, what happened with the highlight item? Nothing, because look, the highlight also has the item class name. So it will span one virtual column. So that's the way we specify something different for a given element. But all the elements have the item class name. So that will only apply to highlight. You can do whatever you want here. Look, you can change the background color. Yeah, that will only apply, oh, here you go. You see, only applies to that particular column, right? Any other questions? No? So one more thing before finishing this session. Even though, assuming you agree, this is a good layout to start working with our React application, let's talk about mobile. Imagine that we are Boris Johnson and we need to click on one of these elements. Yeah? Probably on desktop, I mean, I understand that's a bit small, right? But if you're using your finger and your mouse, you can easily click, right, in one of the other, just 4 buttons, easy. But what happens if Boris is using his BlackBerry, right? Well, hopefully not a BlackBerry, even though that will explain a few things. How do we change the user interface on mobile? Look, first of all, with the web browser, we got a mobile emulator, which is pretty nice. So you can see here that button, toggle device toolbar. If I click on it, essentially we can simulate different devices. Look, it's hard, I cannot zoom that, but I got different smartphones, Galaxy, iPhones, blah, blah, blah. Yeah? So if I select iPhone X, for instance, so that gives you an idea about how your app is going to look like on your smartphone. Be careful with that. This is a low fidelity emulator. So this is only checking the size of the screen. That has nothing to do with hardware. So don't try to check the performance of your app because that has nothing to do with the iPhone, CPU or memory, nothing. Eh? But hey, as a first step, I think it's pretty convenient. I think it's much easier to simulate the behavior of your app following that than having to go to your smartphone and then back to your laptop and then back to the smartphone. So as a first step, that's fantastic. Yeah? All right, so I hope you agree that even though on desktop having all the elements in a row is okay, when talking about mobile, the user interaction changes, right? Because we have very big fingers and we may struggle to click on the right option, right? Imagine that we need to drop a nuke, an atomic bomb to a country and we choose the wrong country, right? So that could get very serious. So we need to think a bit about the user experience. So there is a common pattern when talking about responsive design, which is, if you got all the elements in one row, as soon as you got mobile, change the layout. So display one element on each row. Does it make sense? So we want to change the layout a bit. Another question is, how do we do that? Well, we need to add a media query. Has anyone heard about media queries before? Yes. So media query is a CSS principle where you can declare CSS properties only for some screen sizes, sort of. Yeah? So let's go back to Google. And I'll show you how to add a media query. If you go to Google and you search CSS media query, the first result of W Free Schools, which is a very popular resource on the internet, by the way, it shows you a really good example, right? Look, the way this works. The first part is a bit tricky. Media only screen means if you want to print the web page, don't apply that, so you can pretty much ignore that. But the important thing is the second one. Max width 600 pixels. That means that rule will only apply if the resolution of your screen, if the width of your screen is below or up to 600 pixels. Yeah? So let me copy that and let's try to deal with it. Let me remove the highlight thingy. Look, you see, I'm adding a media query and then I want to change the behavior of my container. So look at what I'm doing. You remember the container was the parent element. And in Flex, there is something pretty sexy where we can easily change the direction of your elements. So Flex by default displays all the elements on the same row. But we can change that behavior to the other way around. And how do we do that? There is a property. Does anyone know the property name? Correct, flex direction. Look, column. So that means if the resolution of your screen is below 600 pixels, change the direction of the elements. Instead of displaying them in one row, display them in one column. Let's have a look. Here we go. You see? You see? So now, of course, we can play a bit. Let's do something, guys. So let's add some gutter, some space between the text and the border, because this is still hard to click with my thumb, right? So to add some space between your text and your content, you can add something called padding. So padding is the space between the text and the border. So for instance, let's have 20 pixels. And then you see, I hope you agree now it's much better, right? You can easily click with your finger on the appropriate option. All right, so look, we can even check the change in real time. So I can tell you what the resolution is: 900 pixels, 800 pixels, 700 pixels, 670. As soon as it goes below 600, it will change. Look, 660, 650, 640, 620, 610, boom, you see? Why 600 and not 700? That's up to you, right? So this is a bit finger in the air. But I hope you get the point. At some point, we agree that even though for desktop that's okay, for mobile, that looks better. Yep. Do you have any questions?
I have like a general question. I noticed you're able to change multiple elements at once in Visual Studio. How do you do that? I thought
Interesting.
Productivity would
Yeah,
be-
productivity, right. Let's talk about productivity. This is completely off topic.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. That's all right. So imagine that I want to rename item, right? Because we realized, imagine that we did a typo. Instead of item, we type item with n, whatever. Sometimes you want to replace multiple words quickly, right? So of course you can do Control F or Command F if you're a Mac user, and then you can find that if you click here, pop, you can replace, right? So I can do item, and I want to replace with Cameron, right? And then you click, which one was that? Replace all, or Option Command Enter. Well, there are some shortcuts, but if I click here, pop, it gets replaced, right? But to be honest, I never do that. I never do that. One of the beautiful aspects of Visual Studio Code, which is the editor we are using, is that it has many, many tricks. And some of them, once you master them, help a lot on productivity. So to replace an item, wait a minute, please. To replace an item multiple times, you need to select it. And then, if you're a Mac user, you type Command D. And if you're a Windows user, I think it's Alt D or Control D or Shift D. I don't remember exactly. D for Denmark.
Okay.
Look, Command D, pop, pop. So I got my 4 items selected, and look now, pop, pop, pop. Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? It's one of my favorite tricks about Visual Studio Code. So you had a question before.
What's the extension? What's the extension for?
There is no extension. This is out of the box. It works out of the box. Yeah, you don't need to install anything. I'll give you another productivity trick. I'm not sure if we had any productivity workshop as such, but because we are talking about that. So you know that you need to save the files manually, right? You change a file and you save it. Yeah, I don't have to do that. So the files are saved for me automatically. That's a massive boost in your productivity. So I'll let you know how to make the files get saved automatically. You need to go to Settings, Code, Settings, or Preferences. Okay, Code, Preferences, Settings. Code on top of on the menu. Code, Preferences, Settings. Yeah, I cannot zoom the menu on Mac. That's why you cannot see anything. Yeah. Anyway, you'll see something like that, right? So if you search Auto, I'm talking on top of my head, so that could not be absolutely correct. Yes, that's correct. If you click Autosave, you'll get a couple of options, equally important. The first one, by default, it will be off, but you can tell Visual Studio Code when to save the files for you. You can save files when you change the focus, that means when you change the file, when you change the window, when you go to Google Chrome. I personally love to leave it after delay. What after delay means? After delay means as soon as I change a file, save it automatically. Even if I'm not changing my focus or my window, no, I'm still working, keep saving all the time, yeah, all the time. And then what's the delay? That's a bit personal, you need to play with it. I set a delay of half a second. And you may be asking, why half a second? That's very personal. Try different values, even try to leave it at 0, it may work for you, right? What I've noticed is if I leave it at 0, sometimes it saves too quickly and it doesn't pick the changes correctly. So based on my experience, half a second works perfectly. But again, that depends on maybe my laptop, my hardware. So just play around with different values until you feel comfortable. I will leave it with 0 because that's the quickest one. And if you have problems, try to increase it a bit. So these two changes will help definitely in your productivity. Look, for instance, I changed the title and pop. You see that at the bottom, right? You see the server. I'll show you again. Look at the server. If I change something, pop, you see, quickly changes everything, right? So that plays really well on productivity. Anything else? No? I got the very, yeah, go for it.
How do you split the screen to you know, when you want to have APGS and APCS on the same screen?
Right, so you want to have the JavaScript and the CSS files side by side?
Yeah.
Cool, so that's a good question as well. So at the moment, it won't work well because I'm zooming it a lot. But if you have a decent laptop, it will look much smaller, right? It will look something like that, maybe. Ignore the content, now it's not relevant. That's a good point. You can have multiple files open at the same time. And how do we do that? Look, you can select a file. Let's see if you can see anything. Not really. So you need to drag the tab. Look, you see, take the tab and drag it and snap it to the right. You see? So if I drag it, drop it on the right, then I can see two files side by side. This is particularly convenient when you are changing two files in parallel, sort of, like this example, yeah? JavaScript, CSS, you can change them in parallel. Any other questions? No? Right, I got a question for you. Again, off topic. There is a lot of discussions about this question, so I don't think there is a perfect answer, but something that you could think about. Because you've seen a bit of CSS. Do you think CSS is a programming language? Yes or not? No? Why not?
Because you're not building something. You just.
Because this is not logic.
Is what?
You can't build any logic.
Yeah.
No? Are you sure? All right. Fantastic. Fantastic. In here,
Well,
I'll zoom it. That's an if statement, guys. If the screen is below 600 pixels, then do that. That's an if else, right?
Yeah.
Is that programming language or not?
Yes.
I'll tell you something. There is a huge discussion on the internet. If you're curious, yes, I think it's a valid discussion. In March, I was one of the speakers in a conference in Amsterdam, and one of the other speakers was writing a book about CSS. And he has on Twitter, he's a very famous speaker. He has on Twitter if CSS was a programming language. And 48% of the developers said yes, 52 said no. So out of thousands of senior developers, there isn't a convention. Yeah? So it's unclear. The only thing we know is that if you want to be super strict, CSS is not a programming language. And the reason is because technically speaking, there is a way to evaluate if something is a programming language or not, which is something we call the Turing. If a language is Turing complete, you know Turing, Alan Turing? Have you heard about him? The father of modern programming, yeah? The data scientist that saved 9 million lives in World War II. If you haven't watched the movie, please watch it. It's one of the best movies, seriously. So he created a mechanism to evaluate if a bunch of instructions can be considered a programming language or not. So CSS doesn't satisfy all these instructions. So technically speaking, cannot be considered a programming language, even though it still is controversial because in some specific aspects, and that's a good example, it behaves like a programming language. Yeah? And the very last thing, and this is not off topic, so this is back to the CSS question. So have you ever heard about mobile first development?
yes.
You will see in many job specs, once you start applying for a job, that they talk about mobile first. We do mobile first, or we're looking for a mobile first developer. So mobile first means you work on mobile first, so you develop your features for mobile, and then once mobile looks sexy, of course, you look after desktop, yeah? So there are many examples of mobile first platforms like Instagram, yeah? If you go to Instagram on the web, on desktop, it looks a bit weird, like, oh, who did that, right? If you check Instagram on your smartphone, it looks much better because it's mobile first. Their focus was on mobile, yeah? Do you think here we follow a mobile first approach? No. No. We started on desktop and then we changed as much as necessary to satisfy mobile. This is not mobile first. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to delete it and let's do mobile first. So can you tell me how to make that CSS mobile first? Yep, go for it. This is mobile, right?
Something to do with class name?
I don't know. This is mobile, but that's not mobile first. So what do we need to change here to be mobile first?
Instead of app, could you write?
No, I don't want, it's not about the semantics, this is about the semantics. So I'm not talking about renaming classes or anything like that. I'm talking about applying the necessary changes on the CSS. Read? No, too far. So do you remember what we did here before? We said, if the resolution is,
You put that first and then put everything inside.
or look at what I can do. Let me remove that. I can assume that flex direction by default, column, that's mobile first. By default, my items will display one after the other. By default, yeah? Look, that's okay. And if I go to desktop, that's not okay yet, but we solve mobile first, yeah? So now, once mobile is extremely sexy, but desktop is not, now we need to apply the necessary changes to satisfy desktop. How do we do it? Well, we bring the media query back, and then you're going to tell me what do we need to change to satisfy desktop.
Width, min width.
Ah, that's a good point. Look, that was targeting mobile devices, max width. But now we think on the other way around. Only for desktop, no problem at all. Only for desktop, min width. Yeah? You see the change? Anything else?
You can put max width as well.
Sorry, say it again? Okay, yeah, let's ignore that bit for now. So it could be 600, I mean, doesn't matter, right? It could be 700. There are no strict rules about what's the threshold. But doesn't matter, assuming that the line is okay. Will it work nicely on desktop now? Will we get all the elements in the same row? Look, that's wrong, right? We don't want that. We don't want that on desktop. What do we want to put here? Row. Fantastic. Yeah? You see the change, right? So now, look, boom, desktop, mobile, desktop. So the result is the same. We haven't changed the behavior. But from a programming approach perspective, we focus first of all on mobile, and then if we need to tweak something, we tweak it for desktop. Yeah? That makes a lot of sense, because you know that today there is way more traffic, web traffic on mobile than on desktop. So you are likely to get more customers on mobile than on desktop. Yeah? Anything else? No? Damiano, Lisa, do you have any questions, if you're still there?
It's not that easy.
Is it again? It's not easy. Well, yeah, but that's the way modern CSS works, right? At least trying to think in a positive way. All these things were way more complicated 4 years ago. So, yeah, at least you know that that's the way you can do it. So once again, you got the workshop on YouTube, so feel free to play around with these principles. And if you have any questions, let Gray or us know. Thank you, guys.